Morning, Tyler. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm excited to get into this conversation. For those of you who don't know, Tyler's a former FBI agent, and the FBI has been in the news a lot recently with anything from corruption to some people call it lawfare, and just wep- people weaponizing that agency as well as other agencies for political gain. But before we get into that, I would like you to talk about how you got into the FBI, some of the backstory about yourself, what you did before that, and just kind of go through that, and then we'll roll right into it.
Yeah. So I was in college during 9/11. In fact, right there in Northern Virginia. And so that affected a lot of my whole career path.
Sure.
And at the time, I was kind of in the final process of going into all things the Peace Corps. And so I was like, yeah, this is a different fight. I'm not going that direction. So I pulled out and then, kind of sat back and waited for, some opportunities. And I finally got the interest to enlist in the Army after graduate school in 2004. And so I went to basic training in 2005, specifically because I wanted one specific job, which was human intelligence collector. And that's just doing, running informants and doing interrogations. So I got that. Went through all the training, went to 2nd Stryker Cav Regiment in Germany as my first unit, deployed to Iraq for 15 months. We were the last unit going into the surge, and we did great things there. And when I was, on the way back after the redeployment, I was stationed at the Defense Language Institute. Typically, you're supposed to go to the language school before you go and do any kind of deployments, but we were in such a need for people to be on the ground that all that stuff got pushed to the back. So I got to go through the French course because I barely made it through on the DLAD to be able to get a language. And and then while I was there, I applied for a couple things. I applied for OCS, got into OCS, but right before that, I also got accepted in the FBI. So I made that decision to leave the Army and go to the FBI. So I was originally supposed to be in the October 2010 start class, but we were pregnant, so I pushed back, and I started in May of 2011. So I was very fortunate to be able to leave the Army at the end of April of 11 and transition directly into the FBI 2 weeks later on May 8th.
Wow.
2011. So I was officially unemployed for 2 weeks, and it happened to be that time period when Bin Laden was killed. So it was a very interesting time. So
Wow.
yeah,
I actually remember being on. I remember having duty. I was on duty that night that happened, and we're obviously had to stay up all night on duty. Yep. And I remember seeing it pop up on the news, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Yeah. I was in the Marines at that time, but yep. That's so. So you only had a 2 week from the time you got out until EAS until you started. So I'm assuming if you had leave saved up, I mean, you were still probably getting paid by the Army.
What I did was I had a bunch of terminal leave, so I actually left went on terminal leave. It's like sometime in March, so I had like a month or more than a month of terminal leave.
Yeah.
And then and I just took it right through the end. And so awesome. There was 2 weeks where I just didn't get, fair enough. But we were transitioning. We drove from California all the way to Virginia with the family and found an apartment for my wife and kids at the time to live in while I was going to Quantico. And yeah, it was, we ended up renting in probably an area that most people don't typically rent in. It was very, kind of sketchy.
Really?
But that's what we could afford at the time, right? So
that area is very expensive.
Yeah, and we didn't realize that. I mean, well, moving from Monterey, where we're in military housing, to, there, it was having to, rent on the economy was shocking to us.
Yeah.
But either way, we made it through. Graduated, went through the training. Graduated September 27th of 2011, and week 6 at the academy. When I went through, there was only like 49 people per class, 50 people per class. And it's a lot different now. Now they send through like 250. I don't even know what it is. It's like multiple classes at once. It's integrated with intelligence analysts, and they have sections, and I don't really understand how it works. But in 2011, it was one class. I was 1109, meaning fiscal year 11, the ninth class to go through in fiscal year 2011. We were the final class in 2011. And we had 48, 49 people in the class, and like 46 or 47 made it through. Because at that point, you've been vetted so much for everything from security to physical fitness to academics, everything, so that the pass rate once you get to Quantico is incredibly high. They're not going to let you fail typically.
Because that's so much money they're investing.
Oh yeah, and it's challenging too, and it's not a cakewalk. Like the academic side, if people fail out, it's usually the legal program. So anyways, made it through there. Week 6 came up, and you get to put in your wish list of where you want to be stationed. At the time, there were 56 field offices, and at the time they did regions. So like there were 5 regions, you can rank them within the region. And so I was like, you know what? I can't afford to live in San Francisco, New York, or LA. So I'm going to pick Detroit because it had 4 seasons. It has
work.
an incredibly low cost of living, right, at the time. And I was like, and it has good work. I mean,
yeah,
stay
busy.
Yes, definitely stay busy. And so I got my first pick. I was like one of the only people in my class that got my number 1 pick.
And this was 2011, 2012? Yep,
2011.
Was there like a mayor or something that got busted with some big
corruption? I was very fortunate. Yeah, so I was very fortunate because when I got those orders, I was originally assigned to what's called a resident agency. Mm-hmm. So the Macomb County Resident Agency, which is about 30 miles kind of north of downtown Detroit, the federal building where the FBI is located. And we went out there and bought a house north of like 26 mile way north. And then on our drive from Quantico to Detroit, I get a call from the special agent in charge's secretary, so the SAC secretary, saying, hey, we've kind of reorganized you, and we're going to put you at headquarters city in downtown Detroit instead of way out, in the RA. And I'd already bought a house way the heck out of downtown Detroit. And so I was very lucky to be there. That was a blessing in disguise because I did get assigned to it was a squad C3. It's the public corruption squad. And I had an amazing training agent, and other people on that squad had immense amount of experience. I was the youngest guy in the squad. All these guys had like 15, 20, 25 years in, and it was the cream of the crop when it came to public corruption squads. And so when I got there, there was an agent, Robert Beckman, who was the case agent on that case you're talking about, the mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick. Mm-hmm. And so I was very, very fortunate to be brought under his wing and trained. And so I kind of worked on that case for probably 4 or 5 months before trial. And then I got to sit through the whole 6-month trial. I was like 10 feet away from him when Judge Edmonds, detained him. Like, because typically on a white collar case, when you're found guilty, they're not going to put you in jail pending sentencing. Well, they did him. They put him in jail pending sentencing on a white collar case. It's unusual. And then he ended up getting sentenced to 27 years, which was at the time the tied for the longest prison sentence of any public official convicted of public corruption in the United States history. It was a righteous case. Fast forward until, early 2021, and President Trump, commuted his sentence. So he's out now. But yeah, it was a very interesting case to work on. By no means am I the guy that put that case together. Like, it's funny because everyone wants to take credit for these big cases, and it's I've heard some pretty crazy stories about that one with everybody and their brother from different agencies. Oh, I worked that case. That was no, there was one case agent that put it all together, and that was Robert Beckman. Everybody else. And technically, yeah, if you worked it, you were on it, you did some. And what I touched on that case was probably a 0.5% of the whole thing. It was minor. The best experience I got to do was sitting through trial, watching how the federal process, the trial process for 6 months. it was a great experience.
Yeah, I mean, if you were on the team, then you had a lot more involvement than a lot of other
Yep,
people.
yep,
That's
yep.
great. And what was he charged with?
These devices reset your trigger after each shot so that you can dry fire just like you live fire in semi-auto. Plus, the Blackbeard fires a laser out of the bore so that you can track your shots and work on height over bore offset for close engagements. And the Blackbeard X uses an accelerometer to track and analyze the motion of your gun on their Mantis X app. Even the United States Marine Corps saw the training value in the Blackbeard X and began to utilize these devices in basic training. So now Marine Corps marksmanship coaches can analyze recruit shooting performance using the Blackbeard in order to make them better shooters. So stop wasting time with traditional dry fire, order yourself a Blackbeard or Blackbeard X today and start training to a higher standard.
Yeah, 33 counts. He was convicted on 24. The biggest one was RICO, the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations charge, which he was found guilty on. And then, the predicate acts for the RICO is like, extortion. There have to be two of them. Extortion was the big one. Bribery, wire fraud, mail fraud, all the typical. I think there was a tax charge in there as well. I know the IRS was on the case, as was the EPA, because part of the case, EPA, Criminal Investigation Division, because there was a nexus to the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department and some sludge contract that, had some environmental elements to it. It's been over a decade. I'm trying to remember it, but yeah, it was it was a pretty in scope broad case, and he was convicted on 24 corruption. Legit corruption, right? Yep.
Wow. And you going back, you said you before the military, you were interested in the Peace Corps. And what swayed your and during that time did the CIA contact you during your interest in the Peace Corps? Apparently, that's one of their main recruitment factors.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I know that I was. Listen, I was a mediocre student at best. Like I fumbled my way through. I graduated with a 2.5 in high school. Made it through college with a 3.0, and I justified, I did great because I'm actually paying for it. That incentive structure was there for me to do well in college, and then I look at myself and I finished, in half of my class, like I was 50% of my class. I'm like, well, no, whatever. But yeah, there was nobody was knocking at my door to like recruit me to anything. So I was just like, well, what do I want to do? I always wanted to travel and a good foothold into like the State Department. Mind you, at that time, I didn't fully understand the context and dynamics surrounding the politics of the State Department versus Department of Defense versus whatever. If I would have known, I probably wouldn't have try to go down that route. But I was like, what's the best way to get my foothold into the State Department? And that would be through the Peace Corps. And I always volunteered and helped people. I did a lot of Habitat for Humanity, a lot of them in college. I really find value in that. It's a good organization, and there was a natural continuance of that. But it was a 3-year deal where I knew that I wouldn't have to worry about an income. I could just work and do something productive and helpful, and I would have a good experience, and then come out and hopefully I can get into the State Department. That was the idea. But 9/11 changed all that. So I'm not, because at the time it was my belief, and I don't even know if this is true or not, but it was my belief at the time that, if you go into the Peace Corps, you can't get into the intelligence community, specific agencies in the intelligence community, and vice versa. And I was like, this is a different fight. I want that. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed in kind of blacklisted because I had served in the Peace Corps. There was a bigger mission for me in my mind at that time than the Peace Corps. So
I'm sure USAID's a different story.
My God. Yeah.
That's another topic. I'm sure we can get into that too. But so you mentioned the D Lab. For those of you who don't know, the D Lab, Defense Language Aptitude Battery, it's basically like it's an aptitude test for language, and I took it as well. And it's such a bizarre test because it's just this made up language and talkie tiki talkie, like all these words, and they're like trying to during the test. For those of you who don't know, like you're basically trying to like decipher verbs, nouns, conjugate, how the grammatical structure and all that, and then you have a quiz on it. So it's just basically determining how well you can pick up on, I'm assuming, those communication cues and things in language. But
it's supposed to give you a litmus test as to, if you score higher, well, there's a better, and it's a good thing to do, because you don't want to throw anybody into like Arabic or Chinese or whatnot, and they have no clue, and you waste a bunch of money training people. Right. and like I said, I got the bare minimum at the time. The bare minimum to get like a Spanish or a French or language was an 85, and that I took that test in 2004. So I think it's increased now to 95 or somewhere in there. But yeah, I got the bare minimum, and I was like, I got French. I'm like, okay, well, that's not very useful, but
you got it. C's get degrees.
Yeah, that's right. That's
not exactly applied to that, but yeah. Okay, so then you you FBI, you part of that case in Detroit, and then what are some other things that let's kind of maybe continue that story on.
So Detroit was an amazing time in my career because we had like I was just working with an amazing squad. Like none of this stuff that you hear about the FBI now in national level was an issue at all at that time. It was like you were doing good work. You were predicating cases that legitimately needed to be predicated and opened and investigated. And guess what? If there was a case and there was enough predication to open it, and you start digging into it, and it turned out there's not enough to prosecute, you move on. You don't push something that shouldn't be pushed. Now, granted, those types of cases are always going to be sitting there in what the FBI calls, like the Sentinel file or a zero file or whatever it is, that can be drawn upon later if new predication comes to light, and you can always draw upon past information. But I had no problem walking away from cases if they didn't need to be, if there wasn't enough to indict. I always felt if there was enough to go to grand jury and indict somebody, you dang well better be ready to go to trial the next day. You don't indict on, you don't indict a sloppy case. And I will say, I say that right now because fast forward to today, what I'm doing in part in my new company is criminal defense consulting. And I've seen this over and over, and it blows me away. I personally never put together a case that went to grand jury that was sloppy. I've been a part of dozens of cases that got indicted. All of them resulted in convictions because they're airtight cases. Believe me, there was a lot of other cases I refused to go to grand jury on because they weren't airtight. They didn't need to go. But I'm seeing this now. I'm on this side, and it's just disgusting. Some of the cases, law enforcement, through the U.S. Attorney's Office, wherever, or even at the state level, because I'm mostly working federal stuff. There's some state stuff that they get pushed through that should never be indicted under. And for me, in law enforcement has a mission, to, as a fact finder, you're not going in there with tunnel vision like, okay, this is my investigative theory, this is who I believe did the crime, and then you focus on that target and you exclude everything else. That's what it seems like is the norm nowadays, and that's absolutely disgusting. That is not how investigations should work. It is just as important to me to find the exculpatory information and bring it to light as it is to find the inculpatory information, meaning information that is favorable to the defense and information that goes in favor of a prosecution. Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of the stuff where a lot of the exculpatory information is missed at best. Withheld is very common. And that is not justice. That is I always made it a point to highlight the exculpatory information in my reports up front so the defense got it right away and they understood it. Because the last thing I ever wanted to be a part of was an investigation that resulted in somebody innocent going to prison. They didn't want it, and I said that multiple times on the stand whenever defense attorneys cross-examined me, when they questioned my, investigative techniques or whatever. So yeah, anyways, I kind of got on my high horse there.
No, yeah, that's great. I mean, because that's all that stuff is what we're going to get into. And on the local level, I noticed that as well as a police officer, where people begin to prioritize those stats as opposed to
Mhm.
justice. And
Yep.
it's all about, and I think that it's difficult, right? Because you want to incentivize people to go after crime. And in some levels, a way to do that is to make it sort of like a competition, right? And so,
Yeah.
you get X number of DUI arrests this year, you get this
Yeah.
award, you get this plaque and this. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at those DUI arrests and how many of those were because someone was actually drunk versus like, I don't know, like that. I think it creates a false or a dangerous incentive structure where the person is no longer prioritizing justice and now they're just prioritizing their numbers. And even stuff as simple as we'd call them activity sheets when we were in law enforcement. And there's this running joke that there's no quotas, but are there? So
Yeah.
if I don't get write a certain number of tickets as a traffic cop, am I going to continue to be a traffic cop, or are you going to kick me off the unit because I'm not writing enough tickets?
Yeah.
And so there are not actual quotas in the sense of a clearly defined number that you're supposed to get, but there are unofficial quotas in the sense of if you are not writing tickets or getting arrested or doing whatever at the certain rate that you should be doing it, you're going to possibly get kicked off this unit. And I've seen it. I mean, that is literally how it happens in the interdiction units, the traffic units, and it creates this very, very dangerous and tyrannical incentive structure that I think is on the national level a reason we see some of the stuff we see. And then obviously you couple that with political incentives and it's a whole different ballgame. So,
well, with the FBI, you say on the local level, you're saying there's not like an actual number target you have to hit. With the FBI, there are numbers.
Well, there you go.
There are actual quotas, and that's the thing that disgusted me because the management, for the most part, I would say in the FBI, there are some good the best managers are the one that don't want to be supervisory special agents. They're the ones that are awesome case agents. They want to come in there. A case agent is just a field agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they get kind of finagled into being the supervisor, and their job is to keep the administrative BS away from you and don't micromanage you and allow you to do your job with unless you actually need to be micromanaged. But for the most part, I never had to be micromanaged because I know how to do this stuff. But point is like the blue flamers, the one that want to climb the ladder regardless of whatever they do, and that's more common in the FBI than having a good supervisor. And I'm hoping that changes. But one of the things that incentivizes these blue flamers are these stats, and these stats are, it's called every year you have this. I was never in management other than acting at one point, so I don't know the name. It's like called the FOSS, Basic Field Office something. Point is like you sit in this room, and I've been in multiple of these where I sat there and contributed on the public corruption program or the white collar program, and the questions are asked. Well, how many arrests do you think you're going to get this year? How many indictments are you going to get? How many how many search warrants? How many advanced investigative techniques are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I know I have this many cases going through the judicial process now, and I have this number of cases open. Am I going to say no? I'm not going to forward predict what I'm going to get.
I'm not a salesman.
Yeah,
so tell you how many trinkets I'm going to sell.
Yeah, it's this Orwellian kind of, I'm going to get 8 indictments this year. Now I have the target. Now I need to go find the criminal. I have the crime. I need to go find the criminal. That's insane to me.
Oh my gosh! I didn't realize that's how they do it.
Yeah, all everywhere, and they invite the state and local partners into these meetings to watch it, and every single time the state and local guys are like, they're so uncomfortable, and they're watching this process unfold, and it's like, it is a stain on the justice system. That process that the FBI goes through shouldn't be like that.
Well, the leaders that you described, it's funny you say this. I just watched Gladiator the original Gladiator, not the remake that I actually have no intention of watching. But it reminds me of that scene where the dying emperor or Caesar is telling Maximus he wants him to take over instead of his son, and He's like, no, I don't want to do it. And he's like, that's why you have to do it, because you're the one that doesn't want this, compared to the son that is just power hungry, and that's all he wants to do. And that's what it reminds me of. Yeah, that same supervisors when I was a cop is the ones that don't want to be a supervisor are the ones you want as a supervisor. The ones that all they want to do is make sergeant. That's their goal. I'm going to make sergeant. That's like, oh my gosh, that's not who you want as a supervisor. And but unfortunate, the way the system is structured and the almost survival of the fittest Darwinian way it's structured, it prioritizes the ones that want that, because they're the ones that are going to play the game in the way that allows them to be the last one standing. And a lot of times that means they're going to just kiss the ring of the bureaucracy.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say, I mean, the FBI is no different than a local department. It's just broader in scope. We
Bigger,
just have offices around the country, right? And for them to play that game, you have to go to headquarters, the Hoover Building. And who goes to the Hoover Building? Typically, single people, single agents, or agents who are married to other agents, or agents who have a family and they just don't really care about their family, because you're going away on a TDY for 18 months. I never did that. I would never prioritize a headquarters position. But that's the thing. That's why, that's how you get promoted. You go to headquarters and then you come back and you get this preference to be a supervisor, and then as an ASAC, which is a assistant special agent charge, and then back to headquarters to be a unit chief. And it's this game. And by and large, the people that you're going to get in that promotion kind of vein are going to be people who don't have the right leadership skills. They prioritize the wrong things in life, not just the job, in life. And the people that are hardworking street agents, case agents that prioritize the right things in life, like their family, the mission, those types of things, they choose to remain in the field office because they don't want to, they don't want to pull their kids out of school, which is a good thing. Why would you do that to your kids? So the FBI, if they wanted to fix this, get rid of that incentive structure, allow, give people quote unquote headquarters time while they're still in the field office, so they get credit for that. And then they could, if they wanted to, move up this, because there's a lot of good agents who would be great leaders. In fact, one of my buddies he was on my squad, and it's public. His name is Chris Gonzalez. He, back in January of 23, he sent out the most viral email I've ever seen in the FBI when he resigned. Basically, it was like 8 pages long. And it was just like, this is the problem with the FBI. And it all boils down to horrific leadership. And it was just, example after example after example. And the good thing,
so he sent it to like FBI all.
I don't. It was great because he hit it, so you don't know who it went to. But I do know I have friends in the Department of Defense, and they read it, so it went everywhere. And when this email came out, he ended up being on. He was on Dan Bongino's show. He was on Kyle Serafin's show. Like But now, now he's he's a local cop now. But he. I always told him as a joke, like, Chris, you're a mediocre agent, but you're an amazing supervisor. Because there are people like he was our acting supervisor for like 8 months, and what we didn't see behind the scenes was he's going to battle every day against the management, trying to make stupid, foolish decisions, and he was sticking up for us and doing the right thing at every turn. And they hated him for it, and they just put him through the ringer because they don't want people. It's not like. I get it. If you're in a management position and you're an acting supervisor, and that acting supervisor calls out the ASAC or the higher ups in front of everybody, that's not good. You don't do that. You do it respectfully and you do it in private. And that's what Chris did time and time and time again. And they just they destroyed him. And he walked away, and he did the right thing. And he came public on it. And I'm kind of hoping, I'll put this out there. This field office here in Anchorage is still, terrible. Some of the same people that are the problem are still in position there. And I was hoping that Kash Patel, once he was confirmed, he would have done something here, and he should, call Chris Gonzalez and say, hey, you want to be the special agent in charge of the FBI Anchorage field office? That would be the best thing, because right now, at least, and I know I'm getting ahead because I'm in Anchorage now, and that's where I moved on from. Nobody, the biggest thing that I realized once I left the FBI was, doesn't matter what other agencies, other partners, other state, local, federal agencies say in public, all of them hate the FBI here. I've in private, they're all like, those guys are terrible. They don't want to have anything to do with the FBI. And it's actually quite funny, because it's true. And when you're in the FBI, your blinders are on and you're like, oh, well, we're dealing with people on a personal level, and that personal relationship is just fine. It's the structure of the FBI that these agencies don't want to have anything to do with.
So let's get into that. Like what
that needs to be
going
fixed.
on? Yeah. What was going on when you were there that, and what led to you resigning, and can you kind of dig into that?
Sure. So, I'll just say I spent 4.5 years in Detroit. I took a voluntary transfer to Puerto Rico. I was there for a year and a half, took another voluntary transfer to South Dakota, where I worked on a native reservation, Pine Ridge, super violent. It was just like murders and child sexual assault. And then I got what was called my office of preference. I've been on this list for my whole career because I've wanted to go to Anchorage my whole life. And so I got called one day and had to make the decision on the phone, and got up here in December of 2017 and immediately started working public corruption. That was my main focus. But since it's the smallest office in the FBI, you got to wear multiple hats. So I handled all the public corruption cases, but some fraud, white collar cases as well. Mm-hmm. And so between 2018 and March of 2021, there was no problems. Everything I was allowed to do my job. There was no problems. But and the one thing I never seen at any level in my experience in Detroit, Puerto Rico, the Minneapolis field office, I was in a resident agency out of Minneapolis, and for the first couple of years here in Anchorage, I didn't see anybody doing, and I could be oblivious to it, but I didn't see anybody doing anything wrong, violating policy on purpose, anything that might be considered criminal in nature. Everybody's politics stayed to themselves. They never they never inserted their politics into any investigation. I've never seen that. I've been friends with people on the left, on the right, in the center, and none of them would ever put their politics into a case. And that's why I was very, very, very proud of, because I didn't want the FBI to be, politicized. That's why I had such a bad taste in my mouth, and as did, I would argue, most agents, if not all of them, when in July of 2016, and then again when James Comey came out and said, he took on the role of a prosecutor and said, we're not going to prosecute Clinton. Well, as everybody in law enforcement knows, it's not the officer or the agent's decision to prosecute or not. That's the prosecutor's decision. Mm-hmm. I don't know why Loretta Lynch didn't handle that. Probably because, she's connected to the Clinton family. But okay, at least have the deputy attorney general do it. But then Jim Comey, so he pisses everybody off who's supporting Trump at that point, and then he doubles down in December or in October, like 10 days before the election, and says, "Oh, now we're reopening the case into Hillary Clinton, and it has to do with Anthony Weiner's laptop and blah blah blah." And then he pisses everybody off who's supporting Hillary Clinton. So he doubles up. He should have just kept his mouth shut the whole time. It's not, that's a prosecutorial decision. And one of the things I did do in the FBI, I was the election crime coordinator in Detroit and here in Anchorage. And so I know election crime. And one of the things they pound into your head is you're not to go public in an election crime or any case against a candidate for official office within at least 90 days of the election. Well, Jim Comey did it in 10 days. Like, he really screwed Hillary Clinton over at that point. I'm saying this all because I'm not saying like I support one candidate or the other. Mm-hmm. What I want is the FBI to be apolitical and not get into the political mud. So that was the first, kind of problem I had with the FBI when looking at it the national level for it getting into politics where it shouldn't be getting into. And then, but again, every problem I've ever seen here in Anchorage had nothing to do with politics. Nothing. It had everything to do with what I argue is this little c corruption, where they prioritize their careers, their power and control over doing the right thing, over making that was the problem I saw here, and that didn't start until March of 2021, and if I can get into a little bit of that. There was a situation where I had an open public corruption case. And I gotta, I have to be thoughtful about how I say this.
Sure.
And there was a member of our team, broader team, who knew about the case clearly, knew about who the targets were, knew about the allegations, and chose to go, work for one of the targets. And we're like, well, you just made yourself a target yourself. Like, that's crazy to me. And, so
they left the FBI to go work for.
They're a member of the team. I'll say that,
okay.
Not
okay.
just the FBI involved.
Okay.
And went to go work for one of the targets of the investigation. And myself, and at the time I was working with the public integrity section at DOJ. So they handle, they handle public corruption cases that are kind of bigger or have, something where the local United States Attorney's Office might be conflicted out or something. And we were on the same page that weekend. We're like, okay, well, we're going to start doing this, and this, and looking at why this person left and what this person, did this person leak information? Did this person get paid to do this? Whatever. I mean, these are all legitimate questions to ask, right? Well, I get in, and that was on that was on a weekend. And then, so I get in on Monday morning with an investigative plan, blessed off by DOJ, and I start carrying it out. And I get called by noon. I get called into the ASAC's office, and that's the number 2 guy in our office. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I explain what's going on. And he's like, "Well, you realize such and such is a good guy. He'll never do this. You need to back off." I'm like, well, so what? I've been trained all through my career. You report wrongdoing, internal wrongdoing, and so I document that. I told my supervisor about it. And she's like, oh, that doesn't seem right. And then the next day,
what you were doing didn't seem right, or what they told you didn't seem right?
What they told me to do.
Okay.
Is to basically stand down and to ignore it. Basically,
yeah.
Is what I was told. So the next day, my co-case agent, so somebody that was working the case with me, and my supervisor and myself were in the same ASAC's office, and he tells us the same thing he told me the day before. So it wasn't just me hearing it; it was all of it. And so I documented that, and we leave that meeting, and my supervisor, apparently this is how I understood it to be. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard this is what happened. She gets called into the SAC's office, which is the special agent in charge. He's the highest ranking FBI personnel in the FBI Anchorage division or field office. And he tells her, "Hey, what the hell is Tyler doing? Like, he needs to knock it off. He's off the case, and I'm sending him to a 90-day TDY to Indian country in Oklahoma." And then they repeat how this individual is a good person, wouldn't ever do anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. And my supervisor at the time allegedly, said, "You're not doing that. I will resign if you do that." And so that was the only thing that kept me from getting transferred out. And so, at the time I was like, "Oh my, this is terrible. What do I do?" So I officially reported it, because in, statute, reporting this type of stuff to your supervisor is a lawful whistleblower complaint. Like, that's what I did. I didn't hear anything. Nobody talked to me about it. And then that was in March of 21, come September of 21, I was like, this is stupid. So I went direct with the Department of Justice OIG, and within a day I was being interviewed by special agents. And they had told me they'd opened a case. Now, is that a criminal case? Is that an administrative? I don't know, but it was a case.
Against the SAC, against the SAC, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the ASAC and the other person.
Okay.
Right. So, that's how it all started. And at the time, we had gotten a new SAC in. He was a former. He was in our office years before, and he came back as the number one, the special agent charge. And I had high hopes for him. And me being naive, like, hey, I want to go tell this guy, like, hey, I'm up front. I have nothing to hide. This is what happened. Mm-hmm. This is what happened before you got here, just so you as the leader of the office knows what's happening. And at the time, he's like, I kind of knew that this new SAC coming in didn't like the ASAC that had told me this. So I felt comfortable going to him and like relatively protected because I'm jumping the chain of command. And I went to him, sat in the office with the SAC and our chief division counsel. And I told him what I did. And I told him all the facts of it. And he's like, holy, you're brave. That takes courage. What do you want to do with your career? Anything you want. What do you want? And I was like, what do you mean, what do I want? I want to be a case agent. And he's like, but is there anything you want? You can't just be a case. You have to move up. I'm like, well, I've always wanted to be a part of the international operations division, which they handle they're stationed all over the world in various embassies, and they do, legal work abroad. I was like, well, I'd like to get my foot in that door because it would be great to go live abroad again at some point. And the nice thing about that is you go do 2 or 3 years abroad, then you come back to Anchorage. So I don't have to leave Anchorage because I love it here. Mm. And so he facilitates that where I can go to headquarters. It was terrible. I went to headquarters for 2 weeks in the international operations division. He was just like, I was like the golden agent, right? He loved me. Well, at that same time, I have another case going on where I was made aware of some filings into my case, or filings about an entity in my case. So entity could be anything from a person, place, or thing, typically a business or whatever, right? So there was a previous case open on this entity that it looked like it was just closed for no apparent reason. And when I started asking questions, the other case agent sent me an email saying, now the prior case agent from 2018 saying something to the effect of, hey, this case was open. It was chargeable. This person who is now touching my case went to the U.S. Attorney's Office and told them, hey, the FBI is not going to dedicate any resources to this case. But then in the case file, it says something to the effect of, the U.S. Attorney's Office reviewed the case and determined there's not enough evidence to prosecute. Those are two separate things. And in this email to me, she goes, it's a flat out lie. That case should never been closed. Well, the problem is that entity that was under investigation in the past is now in the middle of this case that I'm running. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. And so I started asking questions. Well, the problem now is the person that did that, it was friends with our new SAC. And so our SAC goes from, oh, you're so brave and, blah, blah, blah. What do you want to do with your career and all this stuff to 180 degrees because now I filed a complaint against this other person for what looked like filing a false document into a criminal case, which is a crime. That's the allegation. That's what I brought forward. And that didn't go over well with the SAC. And yeah, it was downhill from there because he was friends with them, right? There's a difference. If you report somebody that the leadership doesn't like, you're great. You reported on somebody doing and it's not like I'm saying this I did it. I'm saying this is an allegation. Sort it out internally. That's why we have internal affairs. If it's not true, it's not true, and we can move on, and it's not going to affect the case. If it is true, it needs to be handled, and this guy should not touch my case, no matter what.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, it just snowballed from there. There's so many other things that I blew the whistle on. I mean, that sounds minor, but the case, it's not this massive political corruption that's going on, but it's this localized little c corruption, possibly illegal. I don't know, criminal. I don't know, but that was my request from the very beginning, was for an independent third party to do their own internal investigation, determine what the heck's going on here, because it was all documented anyway. And once this case got indicted, I was going to make sure all of it was turned over to the defense so that they knew what was going on and they could do their own analysis on it. And if it affected it, because you have to, it could be exculpatory. So then that's how it all started. And our chief division counsel was, this person is supposed to go to bat for the FBI in general. Sense of it, or an agent, and you want to do a specific investigative technique, or you want to do this or that. You want to make sure you're within the Constitution, but more narrowly, you want to make sure you're within FBI policy and you're not breaking policy.
Right.
So that's his job, is to provide that, evidence or information and consultations with the agents. Well, he was not. He was acting as the SAC's personal attorney, and he was like his bulldog and going after me over this issue. And so I ended up calling him out in an email in June of 2022. June of 2022. And just like, hey, sir, like, you said this, but you also said this. And I just went through a litany of it was 3 pages of these are contradictory statements you've been making. Why? What are you doing? This negatively affects an ongoing criminal investigation with very broad and deep implications for the state of Alaska. What are you doing? And of course, he forwarded that on. And within months, I was kicked off the squad, the public corruption squad. I was reassigned to work international terrorism, which is here in Alaska. That's where you go and you do nothing. I had no cases, so they effectively sidelined me.
Put you in the corner.
Yep, put me in the corner. And then as we're going through all this, there's so many moving parts going on to this, right? Because we run informants, confidential human sources. And there was one specific informant that was working with us voluntarily, had the great placement and access that a lot of this person's information was being shared with the highest levels of government, foreign governments. He was just a great person to know and to use for national security purposes. Well, this person, outside of his or her role, was provided information by some Alaska Native girls and women that they were being raped and sexually assaulted by by certain people higher up in prominent people in the state of Alaska. And that information was provided by this confidential human source to a special agent who worked counterintelligence. In that meeting was a forensic accountant who documented that whole conversation. It's unusual to have a forensic accountant in source meetings, but in Alaska, when you have a couple things going on where you don't have a lot of people, and as a case handler, you want to be able to put people in that position that has the best connection with a confidential human source, and that's what was happening here. So my understanding, that information didn't get reported at the time, because those are the types of information you have to report immediately. The FBI, sexual assault, it's not a federal crime outside of a native reservation. But at the very least, that agent should have reported it to the Alaska State Troopers or to the local guys for them to handle. That didn't happen. That was sometime in October, November of 2020. Come early January of 2020, that confidential human source filed a complaint against that case agent. And so, lo and behold, what has to happen to that source has to be destroyed, because he filed the complaint. And it wasn't until right that same day that those complaints were filed that original report of these allegations of sexual assault was filed, was actually documented. So we're talking 3-4 months later. And part of those allegations then come public a month later, in a different scenario. But then the vast majority of these victims decided to stay quiet, because why would you trust law enforcement at that point?
Wow.
And so that was a big thing. And so how do you destroy that source? Well, the agent at the time that the complaint was filed to was a female. When she heard all this, she went apoplectic. Like, why the hell isn't this stuff being reported? Like, this is evil. And So the way that FBI management tries to destroy her is they file an internal complaint against her for having, quote unquote, an inappropriate relationship with the source, which, read between the lines, it's, you're just having sex with the source. Like, that's how they try to destroy people. And that's an ongoing issue today. Like, Kash Patel.
My gosh.
And so now they, in order to save their careers, and this is what I believe, in order to save careers, in order to save, they had to destroy agents, this other agent, myself, and the confidential human source, who, like I said, had provided amazing intel at the highest levels of our government and our allies' governments, because they wanted to cover up these allegations of sexual assault that was reported. I mean, and I draw the conclusion, like, how is that any different than the USA Gymnastics team walking into the Indianapolis field office and talking about Larry Nassar and what he was doing to them? There is no difference. Really, there isn't. And I kept like, hey, at the very least, do an internal investigation. If this is true, deal with it. Here's the thing. I know it's true because the confidential human source, the forensic accountant, the other agent, the female agent that is now being thrown under the bus, myself, we all saw it firsthand. We know, well, the forensic accountant is willing to be interviewed, testify. The confidential human source is willing to. The victims are, I don't know if they're willing to or not, because there could be some, I don't know. But the point is, like, none of those people were ever interviewed. Just interview them. Decide, like, get to the bottom of it. Did this happen? And if so, who's responsible? And if you're responsible, what are the consequences? And how do we fix this from ever happening again? Especially in the context of the USA Gymnastics team. And it's just like, it's disgusting. So my thought process is like, well, okay, we're talking about 3-4 months. How many victims are there now that may not have been victims if we would have done the right thing? When I say we, I mean the FBI, because the FBI failed here. And so that was another thing. Like, it's just there's just so much more, like national security related stuff I blew the whistle on, that I'm not going to get into. Those are the two most egregious ones, I would say. But as I go along, come January of 2023, we're in basic, it's a cold war in the office between myself and like a handful of other whistleblowers, 4 or 5 others, and the executive management. And so I'm, in October of 2022, I was removed from the squad, and I was like, you know what, guys, like, fine. And so I went on leave for several weeks. I needed to get myself straight. And so I came back to the office in January, and I was told, hey, look at this. And I open up the FBI Red Side share drive, which is, it's secret. The overall share drive is secret, but everybody in the field office has access to that share drive. So you're talking about 130 people. And I was pointed to this file that was named after my supervisor, his last name, and the ASAC's last name. So it was like last name, and it was my supervisor and my ASAC. And I was like, well, not. And they didn't password protect it, but myself and probably half the field office got into it and read the documents that were in there. What it was a drop file on me, on 3 or 4 other employees, on how to get us fired. And it was their blueprint. Basically, when I read it at first, I'm like, they're like, Special Agent Tyler Vose, he lacks candor because of this. And it's like alleging that, this supervisor did that. And like, there's no evidence to support it. It's just saying he lacks candor. And so I was like, oh, I know that they forwarded that to our internal affairs section at headquarters. Well, all right, at least I know now what I can expect. And, I know what their game plan is. And so I wrote a 31-page rebuttal to that, printed it off. And it's still, when I printed it off, they'll probably go search the field office, but I printed off all of these documents because I don't trust the FBI. A lot of their digital evidence, a lot of the digital like emails and documents just happens to go missing. Who knows? Like, and it's done probably at headquarters. So I printed everything off and I hid it around in 3 different locations, that field office, and they're still there. To my knowledge, they're still there. And so they want to go, and I know a lot of that stuff that I printed off has been deleted and is missing, but it's there now.
Wow.
In digital format. I just don't trust them. And it sounds paranoid, but that's what they do.
No, and I had a very similar. There's so many similarities to that, to what you just described, to what I had at my last apartment. Not to
Yeah.
the, some of those things you just described were, I mean, crazy level corruption, but the lack of trust, I think, is one of the biggest ones. And one of the things I would tell people the last couple of years before I left my department, the most of my stress came from our department headquarters. It wasn't what happened
Yeah.
on the street. It wasn't the
Yep.
criminals. That was. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to use deadly force to defend yourself or to defend someone else, then you're going to want a good legal team defending you after the fact. And that's why I trust attorneys on retainer. And if you want to see how AOR compares to those other CCW insurance providers, then scan this QR code or check out my affiliate link in the description. They have individual and family plans so that you will be legally protected should you ever need to protect your life or someone else's life. And don't forget to use promo code DAD to save $25 on your initial sign up. That was what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to have the tribe or family I was working with to be, stabbing each other in the back. And I think about that book. I think it's called Tribe or Tribal or something like that. But it describes that, and obviously, when I say this, there's a lot of people that are hypercritical of the police. They'll be like, "Oh, well, that's just the blue behind the curtain." That's not what I'm talking about. It's in any business, any corporation. If you can't trust the people you're working for, and when I say trust, I don't mean trust them to cover up for you. I mean trust that you guys are, well, in the sense of law enforcement, trust that they are prioritizing law enforcement above all else. Like that is what we're there to do. When you can't do that, when you can't trust them, you can't do anything. And the amount of stress that results from that it's really hard to describe. And so, yeah, I completely understand what you said. I mean, what you said there. I mean, there were situations in my department, and since we're on the topic, I'll get into it. But so I was a patrol officer, obviously first, and then I got to be an SRO, a school resource officer.
Oh, okay.
And I loved it. And part of the reason I did that was I noticed the bureaucracy and what was going on in the patrol division. And during roll call one morning, we had this. The day before, they had someone pass a car, and their license plate reader popped off that it was a stolen car, and so they initiated their emergency traffic to turn around and do a traffic stop. Had not initiated a pursuit yet. Turned around to do a traffic stop, and the person immediately fled. Right, so they immediately mashed the gas and flipped their car. Thankfully, only hurt themselves, didn't hurt anyone else. So just the person who stole the car hurt themselves. But the next day in roll call, they told us, "Hey, so this happened last night. So here's what we're gonna do. If you guys see any stolen cars, don't try to stop it." And I was like, "There's no way I just heard them say that. Like, maybe." It's early, first shift. Maybe I'm tired. There's no way I heard them say what they just said. So I went up to one of my sergeants and I was like, "Hey, I just want to confirm that you said that if we see a stolen vehicle, we're not supposed to stop it." And he was like, "Yeah, well, it's just all the liability and stuff." And I was like, "Okay, whatever. I can't. There's nothing I can say to respond to that."
What assignment is that? If you want to share, that's crazy to me.
I'm gonna probably redact it in the final episode, but it's.
You don't have to talk about it, but yeah.
It's actually relatively big department. And so another example was my buddy was in an armed foot pursuit, and he was, now at the time, obviously I'm backing him up. I don't know. I didn't know the guy was armed at the time, but nonetheless, it was a pursuit, which is it was a foot pursuit, which is a dangerous thing, regardless, any pursuit. So I'm driving emergency traffic to back him up. I think I'm going 70 and a 35, lights and sirens. There's no cars on the road. I think one car I had to go around. And this was actually the closest thing to like a scene out of Grand Theft Auto video games I've ever seen, because it was like 5 departments. And as I'm pulling up, stereotypical dude running across the road with jeans and white t-shirt, and 4 departments. And then there's a helicopter overhead, police helicopter overhead. One of the officers to detain this guy had to pull his taser. Well, our department's policy was anytime someone pulls a taser,
even just out of the holster, that is a use of force that requires the supervisors to review the footage. So they had to go back and review that officer's entire body cam footage and dash cam footage from the moment it clicked on. Well, I was in front of him, and the lieutenant that was reviewing the footage said that he thought that I looked like I was going too fast. So then he reviewed my footage, and he was like, "Yeah, I think you were going too fast. You weren't exercising due care." So he tried to write me up for not exercising due care, and I challenged it, and I said, because we have to like sign the write-up or accept it or challenge it, and I challenged it, and I said, "Okay, sir, I just want to understand, like, I did something wrong. What could I have done differently that would have not gotten me written up?" I said, "What speed could I have been going that I would have not gotten written up?" "Well, you just got to exercise due care and, take everything." I said, I was doing that. From my perspective, I was exercising due care. I was considering everything in, like I said, sunny day, dry roads, whatever. And he said, "Well, I said, "Is there a speed I could have been going?" I asked it like 3 different times, right? Because you said I was going too fast. So anyways, he could not give me an answer. So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna talk to the chief. So I'm to the chief. The chief reviewed the footage, and he basically got rid of the write-up. But at the same time, he was like, "Well, you still got to keep in mind, like, I'm like, what?" Because he bumped it down from a write-up to a verbal counseling. I'm like, why am I being counseled? It shouldn't be it should be something or absolutely nothing. I like, what's going on here? So there were several instances like that I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, what's the priorities? What's the motivations? And then it kind of all culminated to when I was an SRO. So I left patrol because a lot of that stuff. It was just like, okay, I can't. You are incentivizing non-proactive policing, complacent policing. You're incentivizing people to go park in the parking lot and wait for calls and do the very bare minimum and not be proactive. And we also had a system. It's called, which is how they would they would keep track of write-ups and use of forces and all that stuff. And they would always tell us like, "Oh, not all negative. It's to keep track of everything." But I was like, okay, but the problem is you're required to track the negative and you're only encouraged to track the positive. So you run that across time and you're going to have more negatives than positives. So I went to the SRO unit and I loved it. I actually loved that unit more. And that was actually, I started right around the time, right after I started the Nashville Covenant shooting happened, which was horrible shooting at that private school. And we were actually on spring break during that. The week after that, I'm a floater at that time, an SRO floater, which means that I would like fill in for other SROs if they're sick or vacation or whatever. I spoke with the administration, because one of the things they told us is, "You're a guest in the school." They're like, "You're a guest in the school. You kind of got to be diplomatic, whatever." And talk about that in a second, how that caused problems. But I talked to the administration. I was like, "Hey, since we know that these psychopaths profile these schools, they case the schools and look for soft targets. Today, when I do my patrol and we'd walk around the school and check doors, make sure the doors were locked, periodically, randomly. And I said, when I do that, I'm going to have my rifle with me. I'm not going to point it up. I'm going to have it slung. That way it's like, if someone's looking at this school, they're like, I'm not going to that one." So I did it. I had a couple of teachers that were like, "Hey, did something happen?" I was like, "No, nothing happened." I explained it and they were like, "Oh, I actually like that." Like they said, like, it made me feel safe. So for 3 days I did this. And then on the third day, ironically, while I was doing the door checks, I get a call from my lieutenant. He was like, hey, buddy. And what's funny is every time they'd call us and it was something wrong, it was, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" It's like, first of all, I'm not your buddy. And don't sit here and try to put on this face for me. "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" I'm good. "What are you up to?" "I'm just getting checking doors, sir." It's like, "Hey, look, I know you mean well, but we've been getting some complaints about you scaring the students and scaring the teachers." I said, "Really? That's interesting, because that's not my experience." I said, "Honestly, I've had teachers come up to me and say they like this and asked if this is like a new thing we're doing. And then I've had students, because the kids, it's elementary school, they think it's cool. They play Call of Duty. They think that's gun cool. That gun's cool. So, and that's not why I'm doing it. But if we're here to build relationships, well." So, so I kind of dig a little bit deeper, and I was like, "Okay, well, where did you get these complaints from?" He's like, "Well, I didn't hear the complaints myself, but your sergeant called me and told me that she got some complaints." So I called the sergeant and talked to her, and same questions. I said, like,
Was it a specific school? Was it a specific person? Maybe you can't list the name. How many complaints did you get? She said, well, I didn't get any complaints, but I had a couple other SROs call me and tell me that they were worried that someone might complain. It's like, okay. And it was the SROs for the schools I had been filling in for. And so I was like, okay, so no one's complained, and you guys are just preemptively doing this in case someone complains. That wasn't the first time that happened. Another time I was at a school, I parked my car. So typically they would park in the parking lot or somewhere, but I wanted to park my car closer to the door for two reasons. One, because it's more conspicuous in case someone drives by and they see it like, oh, there's a cop at that school, and as opposed to it being, lost in a sea of cars in the parking lot. One, there's a cop at that school. Two, we didn't have safes in our office to keep our rifles, so our rifle had to stay in our car. So it's like, now it's faster to go get it. I don't have to run across the parking lot. Well, I get a call from the same sergeant, and she's like, hey, you can't park your car there. And I said, okay, is there a reason? Or, well, because if someone drives by and they see that, they may think something's happened. Really? That's your justification? So, mind you, this same sergeant, one day we're on duty. This is just a quick caveat. Yeah. We're on duty, and she's walking around, and this is in a school on duty. We're not doing training. There's no magazine in her gun, in her holster. Like, her mag well's empty. And I walk up to her, and I was like, hey, Sergeant, I don't know if you know this or not, but you don't have a mag in your gun. And she was like, oh, yeah, I swapped it out earlier. I still don't know what that means. I don't understand the context. So, and then she doesn't immediately remedy the problem. She just stands there because the lieutenant's also there. So I think she was trying to be all discreet. Looking back, I shouldn't have been discreet. I'd be like, hey, dummy, you don't have a mag in your gun. But she pulls out a mag and inserts it into her gun. No press check. No idea if there's a round in the chamber. And so that's the sergeant in question. But it continued to get worse and worse and worse. So actually, you were talking about, having repercussions. I got invited to go to this conference. It was called the Street Cop Conference. It was this organization. Yeah. Now the organization's kind of under fire because some things that happened at their other conferences. But I was on their podcast. They invited me to come to their conference. It's typically like $500 to go. It's a training. They do like a week of training. Yep. And like interdiction, stuff like that. And they invited me to go for free. So, and it was in Nashville. I sent a training request through my chain of command so that I could at least be on the clock and not have to take leave to go to this training. Because it's like, you guys aren't paying for the training. At least you could, and that was normal to do. And so got approved all the way up to the chief. This rifle thing happened with the whole, people may get scared with a rifle. And literally, you can see on the approval sheet, the chief marked out and denied it, and his justification was personnel. The chief doesn't deal with personnel on that unit level. That is like the captain, sergeant level. So that was one of those, like, slap him on the wrist, we'll teach him a lesson. So the more conspiratorial type things that happened when I was in that unit, the first one was, after that Covenant shooting, Governor Lee implemented a new law where if there is a door found unsecured at a school, but if it's found by law enforcement, be it SRO, Tennessee Highway Patrol, anyone, doesn't matter, they're required by law to report it up their chain of command. And then that's required to go all the way to the state. So they're taking like door security seriously. Yeah. That's kind of, now in that situation, they just shot through the door. But nonetheless, having secure doors is priority. Sure. And so that law summer happened, they passed that law, and then the fall semester, the first 3 days of school, we had to report 6 doors that were unsecured across our whole district, which resulted in I want to say $1.5 million worth of funding that the school got docked because of this new law. Serious consequences, as they should be. And so you would think, right? You would think that if the priority was safety and security of the students, law enforcement, whatever, you would think that they would address complacency. They would say, okay, we need to figure out why people are leaving these doors unlocked so that this doesn't happen anymore. Not just because we're going to lose money, but also in case one of these psychopaths come to our school and try to kill our kids that we cherish so much. You would think that's what they would do.
But that's not what happened. They had an emergency meeting with the school district, like superintendent or whatever his name is, or whatever his title is, their attorneys, the department's attorneys, and all these high, brass people. And the result of that meeting was not to address complacency in the school, but that SROs were only allowed to do 2 door checks per day, and those door checks had to be scheduled and announced ahead of time.
You're defeating the whole idea of the law. Like, hey, what's happening when nobody's watching, right? Oh my God.
Yeah. So they would typically before, and I'm sure you could infer this, it was almost like an audit, like throughout the day.
Yeah.
Also, because you sit down all day, and it's like, okay, I need to get some steps in. You'd walk around the door, check the school, make sure, and it's like, hey, hypothetically, if a shooter were to show up right now, could they gain access? You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know when I'm going to check, and I'm going to check. Before the law was enacted, it was a slap on the wrist. Hey, keep your door closed. After the law, obviously more of a consequence, as it should be. And so, yeah, they're saying like, well, these audits now have to be scheduled and announced, and you're only allowed to do 2 per day. And we had Zoom calls. So that after these meetings, we had Zoom calls where they told us this. They didn't email us. They didn't put it in any formal directive or whatever. And one of the SROs asked, I want it in writing. And they told him flat out, no, we're not going to put it in writing. And I told him on the Zoom call, I feel that what you're doing is prioritizing the bottom line, the budget, over school safety and security. And I also feel that you're undermining the Governor Lee's intention for that bill. And it's wrong. Like, what you're doing is wrong. Well, that was not a good thing for my career, because now I'm speaking up and they don't want to hear it. And it got to the point to where so that happened. And then the next thing that happened was, well, one of the days I was at the school, so we would like typically sit in the front office, and whenever a parent would come in to pick up their kid, if pick them up early or something, they would have them show a form of ID. And I ask everyone I tell this story to, what form of ID do you think most people would show when they pick up their kid?
Driver's license.
Driver's license. And most people did. 99 times out of 100. Well, this lady showed a passport. Okay. It's not illegal to show a passport. It's a form of ID. Sure. But I thought to myself, well, that's kind of strange. Maybe she walked to the school. But if she drove, I would assume she'd show a license. But nonetheless, I'm not going to say anything to her. I'm just going to go at the parking lot, hang out for a little bit. And if I see her get into a car, I'm going to go up and make consensual contact with her, right? Which is contact that anyone can make consensual contact. And I'm going to say, hey, ma'am, do you have a driver's license? Well, sure enough, she walked out to her car, got in her car. I played out that scenario. And I said, ma'am, do you have a license? And she said, no. I said, okay, well, I can't let you drive. I'm not going to write you a citation. You can call a ride. You can do this. I gave all these options. I even offered to give her a ride. This turned into this officer's profiling people. She was Hispanic. This officer's profiling people, blah, 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 whatever. And I had my sergeant call me the next day saying, are you telling parents they can't pick up their kids because they don't have a license? I said, no, Sergeant, that's not what happened. I explained. He said, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I can squash this whole thing. Well, about 2 months later, that exact same scenario happened where I'm sitting in the office, lady comes in, shows a passport, and now I have the heuristic to tell me that, okay, this is probably what's going on. I don't say anything to her, go in the parking lot, almost carbon copy. She goes out there, gets in the car, whatever, doesn't have a license. I gave her the same options. Well, now it's escalated to like even worse. And this got to the point to where I had 2 sergeants telling me that I was not to enforce any sort of traffic violations or anything like that on private property. It's a public school. And I said, okay, here's the thing. If I were to stop a drunk driver, no one would bat an eye at that. Yep. I would honestly probably get an award for that, because my responsibility as SRO for protecting these kids doesn't stop inside that building. It also includes the curtilage of the school, and actually beyond that, because it's in the city and I'm a city police officer. So protecting these kids doesn't stop inside that school. And I said, if I were to stop a drunk driver, no one would have a problem with that. I said, drunk, and I actually researched all this ahead of time, but I said, drunk driving represents 40% of motor vehicle accidents,
whereas driving without a license represents 30%. I said, that's only a 10% difference between those two things. And me letting a kid get into a car, knowing that or reasonably having a suspicion it's an unlicensed driver, is I'm
It's
at
not
least
a whole lot
morally
responsible in a car with a somebody who's drunk.
Exactly. I'm at least morally responsible to do something, and if not legally responsible to do something. And so
Right.
I was like, I can't even comprehend what's going on right now. And this got to the point where I had the captain of the unit talking to me. We had like a meeting, and he was like, we're just trying to determine whether or not this is a good fit for you. This unit's a good fit for you. And I said, okay. And he compared me to this other officer, and I'm not going to use the officer's name because I don't want to, but this other officer is what we would consider retired on duty, overweight. Yep. He doesn't take the job seriously. In fact, he was one of the officers early on that would not wear his body armor on duty while we were at the school. And like literally just not wear, and he'd be out directing traffic with no body armor on. And it was at my kid's school. And so I asked questions about it, and I was like, and they were like, yeah, he doesn't wear his armor because it's his back. He has back issues. I was like, okay, then why is he doing that job in the first place?
Right, as a law enforcement.
Yeah. And so I knew how my department worked in terms of getting things changed. So I may or may not have organized several civilian complaints to the department and told them who to call and who to email. And the next day the policy changed and he was wearing his body armor. But so this is the officer that I'm being compared to in this meeting with my captain. And he's like, take you and Officer, we'll call him Smuckatelli. Officer Smuckatelli. If I was going to pick who I'd want to be in that school when an active shooter showed up, or no, I'm sorry, he didn't say that. He said if I were going to pick who were to have more tactical acumen, he said, I'm going to default to you, talking to me. He said, but if I were to pick who I wanted to meet with a principal, who do you think I'd pick? And I looked at him and I said, well, sorry, I guess it depends on the principal. He didn't want to hear. Yeah. But he's like, well, it's Officer Smuckatelli. And I was like, okay, sir. And in hindsight, I wish I would have said, well, who do you think an active shooter would at least want to meet? But nonetheless, so that was those were the things that were happening. And I was just like, are you kidding me right now? What is, I feel like I'm in, this parallel universe. This doesn't even make sense. How do you hear yourself? Like you're so audaciously going against the values that I would think the public would want us to have, that it's almost a joke. And so sorry, I didn't mean to capitalize on the interview there.
No, it's a good example.
Not the interview, but yeah.
It's a good example. Like this is the same thing. Like at the state, local level, and federal level, this is the thing. It was like, I don't know if it happened to you, but there were multiple times where I thought, am I wrong here? And evaluating, like, am I the crazy one? Am I the one that I'm seeing all this stuff? And no, I'm not. I'm not the crazy one. It's just that's the stuff that people do, and they have no business being in law enforcement at any level.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, the system, like we were talking about earlier, the promotion system and how it's almost Darwinianly structured, prioritizes that. And at my department, it does it even worse because typically when you work for a company, you get put on probation, like your first 6 months or whatever, you're on probation. Well, there you get put on probation every time you get promoted to a new position, and so every time you get moved to a unit or a new position, you're on a year of probation. So
you could be perpetually on probation if they keep transferring you, and they can get rid of you if they want.
Yep, or it inculcates a mindset of compliance with the bureaucracy. Because even if you have someone that maybe they're someone who will push back, well, now they're at least not going to push back for a year, and they're going to indoctrinate them into that type of mentality. And so, it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, it's there's one thing I was thinking about that I didn't get to with the allegations of these child sexual assault and against Native women, and one of the things that I kept hammering on that for a couple of years, and I ended up laterally transferring from the FBI in July of 2023 to Army CID. Because here in Alaska, there was a specific position set aside for corruption and fraud within because Alaska has a couple, Army installations, and the Army puts about $4 billion a year into Alaska, or not 4 billion a year, 4 billion, like a little over 1.1 billion. So 4 billion over 5 years or something like that. And so there's a lot of contracts coming in. And so you want to review those contracts. I mean, if there's red flags, you need to investigate. Is there contract corruption, fraud, kickbacks? Right. It's essential. Like, because one of the problems that you'll see is like, okay, you sign a contract with the Army, and then this company will do what's called product substitution. And then now you have your military equipment failing or not doing what it should be doing. And whose lives does that risk? And that's the work. So that's kind of what I transferred over to do. When I got over there, I was sending emails from my Army email address and copying my chain of command on it directly to a specific DOJ attorney saying, hey, this is what's going on. They're still going after me. I'm in the Army now, and they're Army CID, and they're still going after me. They met with my supervisor, tried to get me fired, which is outside the scope of their employment, like the local level executive management, completely outside the scope of employment. You can't do that. They took that document I told you about on the shared drive that was it was a complete lie. It was just because they took that, they walked it over to there was a trial going on in March of last year against a local Anchorage police officer who was engaged in a fraud that I did the whole case while I was in the FBI. And this individual chose to go to trial, and he went to trial, and the judge on it was a guy named Joshua Kindred. Joshua Kindred made some news several months ago, last summer, for having to resign under threat of impeachment because he was having, there's a whole investigation into him, how he was engaged in, a lot of bad stuff with some of the prosecutors that he shouldn't have been doing. So anyways, the FBI walks this document, the one that was on the shared drive, over to that judge in that case, the one I worked, because I was going to be a witness on, and I was preparing with the U.S. Attorney's Office to be able to go to trial and to testify. So they have a meeting in camera, and they give him this false document, and the judge, I don't blame the judge. The judge has his own problems, but in this case, I don't blame him. He saw something that they wrote up, and a judge should be able to believe law enforcement, should be able to believe them and not question. And so he said, no, Tyler, you can't testify in this trial. So what does that do? That kicks off a big meeting between my chain of command and the U.S. attorney, and the Army CID said, no, Tyler, you can't work any more criminal cases. They screwed my career that way, right?
Oh my gosh.
And it's bad. So what my argument was like, so now this guy's going to trial. The person that did 99% of the work is not allowed to testify. How is that fair? How is he not able to face his accuser? Because I'm basically the accuser, right? And he gets convicted. And so they did that. But as I'm communicating, when I'm with Army CID, I'm communicating with this DOJ Office of the Inspector General attorney. And I was explaining all this. And then I said, oh yeah, and what about all these allegations of, this is what happened, like with these allegations of sex assault against all these Native girls that the FBI just ignored. And it went on for months. And then part of it went public in a completely separate situation. And then the FBI covered it up by saying, hey, the first time we ever heard of it was on January 21st of 2021, when in fact, the first time they ever heard of it was 4 months before.
Wow.
And so I'm putting this in an email to the DOJ OIG attorney, and he responds, this, mind you, this is in April of last year, 4 days before the DOJ and the FBI settled with the USA women's gymnastics teams for $140 million because of the exact same situation.
Yeah.
And said, hey, dude, how is this any different? The same fact pattern is going on here. And the DOJ's response was, hey, I know, we just don't have time to look at everything.
Oh my gosh.
And I redacted his name. And I put it, and that's open. You can look at that. I put that email in an article that I published on February 1st.
Wow.
That is the most disgusting thing I've ever read. And part of me feels like, did he just say that to say it? Maybe I drop it, and maybe they do have something they're looking at, and they just can't disclose that they have an investigation. Yeah, that's possible. But for somebody to put that in an email, he should have just not replied to me.
Yeah.
But he actually said, yeah, we don't have time to look into everything. And I was like, this doesn't ring a bell to you? And I sent him a link of the $140 million, settlement. And it's just like, how is there not an investigation? Still to this day, everybody involved in that have not been interviewed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
I think
and the only thing I think of is like, why don't they care about these, Native girls in a small village off the road system? They could care less. They don't care. So when Attorney General Barr came here a couple years ago, and this is under the Trump administration, he did this tour around Alaska, and it's like, oh, we're very much interested in helping the Native population and law enforcement, and it was just window dressing. None of it matters. It's a joke. It's a joke, and it's just it needs to be fixed, and it's so
that's crazy.
There's just much more going on.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the fact that they wouldn't let you testify, and I think I said the wrong thing. I said Garrity. I meant to say Brady listed. It's almost like being Brady listed, when a cop.
Giglio.
Giglio? Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
So there's two things. There's Henthorne and there's Giglio. Giglio is an actual finding. After an internal investigation, they find you're responsible. You did this, and now you have to disclose this to the prosecutor going forward, and it may be disclosed to the defense. That's Giglio, and that really does screw your career over. Henthorne is just kind of, my understanding of it is just information that your field office or their drop file, their nasty file on you, they can turn over, and that's what they turned over. But the problem is you can't file a document with a judge that's a complete lie. Like I said, when there's no evidence. I drafted a 31-page rebuttal, and it's the functional equivalent of like when you were writing an affidavit for a search warrant, and you have statements made by somebody, and you take out a small excerpt of the statement or of the text message or whatever, and frame it as, this is what's going on, to be able to get the probable cause for a search warrant. When you expand that and you look at the context of the statement, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it's lying by omission.
Yeah.
It is. And it's just, every time, like at the federal level, as you probably know, it's a federal crime to lie to a federal agent during the course of a lawful investigation. And, that I always had to remind people that also means omitting relevant information. It's better for you not to say anything it's better for you just to not talk to me than it is for you to actively lie. Or if we get into a context of a situation, just say, I don't want to answer that. Instead of like purposely going through and omitting relevant information, because you can be charged for omitting relevant information as well. That's what they did.
Yeah, because your intent, ultimately, it's about your intent. Your intent is to make them believe that it was something else. And I mean, it just goes back to being even like getting polygraphed. Like they talk about during your polygraph, like if you omit something, we're assuming you're lying about it. Yeah.
It's, and the thing is, like, that was in January of 23. I just took my, I just took my, a polygraph and I passed it. And like, I have nothing to hide. These guys, we'll see.
That's wild. Hey, I want to get into something next. Let's take a real quick break.
Sure. Yep, no problem.
If you're interested in new innovative training tools, then you have to check out Ace VR. And make sure to use promo code DEFENDERS to get 1 month free. I'll admit that when I first heard about this device, I thought it was probably a gimmick and there was no way it would feel realistic. But the moment I put on the headset and held the controller, it was obvious to me that we had stepped into a new era of firearms training. Not only does the virtual reality environment accurately represent the real world, but the pistol controller has the same weight and feel of a real gun. And the trigger feels just like an actual trigger. With Ace VR, you can play several different game modes, from drills that work on the fundamentals of marksmanship to competitive stages, and even more entertaining modes that work on situational awareness. You can also compete with friends and others in the Ace community. And don't forget to use promo code DEFENDERS to get 1 month free. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And we're back. So, we've each shared our experiences with corruption, conspiracy at some of the instances. And I'd like to get to talking about either advice or recommendations for people, for officers, either on the local level or federal agents who find themselves in a similar situation? Because obviously this is not isolated. And what to do in those situations? Because this is something
Sure.
I've struggled with or thought about a lot. And there's, on one hand, people tend to think like, well, okay, I'll just wait till I get to a certain level of authority and then I can affect change. And the problem with that sometimes is, well, how much of your soul are you going to sell before you eventually start to do something?
Yep.
And then the other option is like, well, just get out, just leave, and then you're left
Yeah.
with only the corrupt people in that organization. So
Yep.
I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought too, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that and what your recommendations would be to someone who finds themselves in a similar situation.
Right. So I would say document everything that's going on. You don't necessarily have to do anything with it. Just document anything that comes across to you as unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Just at the very least, send yourself an email. Now you have a time-stamped, hopefully within an hour or two of it happening, because contemporaneous notes, contemporaneous documentation is worth more in the eyes of the law than something where like, oh, I'm trying to remember 6 months later what happened, right?
Yeah.
You document it at the time, it's more valuable. Always put, if you're like, what I ended up doing was every time I sent an email to anybody involved in anything I was dealing with Whistleblower, especially my chain of command, to include the deputy director of the FBI, Paul Abate, I would put read receipts. Put read receipts on those. And that was important in my case because on 3 different occasions, I sent direct whistleblower complaints directly to Deputy Director Paul Abate, who happened to be my boss when I was in Detroit. And at the time in Detroit, he seemed like a really great leader, but he turned out to be one of the bad guys. And he did order a field office inspection here. So, but of course, it was a horse and pony show. Nothing came of it. And on 3 separate occasions, I sent direct whistleblower complaints to him. He erased them without reading. That's pretty telling. When you have a chain of command and they're erasing your lawful whistleblower complaints without reading the emails.
Wow.
That's all documented. That's all in my complaint. And,
Now, when you say read receipts, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So especially in Microsoft Outlook, which is, I imagine, most departments, most agencies use, you can go in there and say, hey, check, notify me when the recipient receives it and notify me when the recipient opens it.
Oh, I see what
and
you're saying.
it'll shoot you back an email or a little email saying, hey, at such and such time, this was received, and at such and such time, the recipient opened it. Now you can prove that they actually looked at it and saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't claim, oh, well, I never saw that email,
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important. What myself and many others in the Anchorage office would do or several others, the one thing they love to do is talk, but not document anything. So it'd be like, okay, go back to your desk. It was my understanding based on our conversation, this is what you want. This is what you said. This is, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then always, always, always put something to the effect of, if I am misunderstanding anything, please respond.
Mm-hmm.
And not once did any of us whistleblowers got a response. So, we started putting in there things like, okay, no response means you agree with everything I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's a little bit bold, but at the very least, but the supervisors know when you start doing that, you're documenting them.
Yeah. You're following up.
Yep. They hate that. And, but that's the thing. And I always tagged those emails with a case file number. So when discovery came, all that stuff is being turned over.
Mm-hmm.
And then when
I'll say they hate it if they're doing something wrong, right? If it's a supervisor who's doing the right thing, then they're honestly probably going to like that. Be like, oh, good. Like they're really paying attention to these meetings and they actually know what their marching orders are, as opposed to like, oh gosh, now they're keeping track of me and they're going to know like, I didn't want that to be on the record. Dadgummit. So yeah, no, I think that's really good because it works. It's good if the person's good. It's also good if the person's corrupt.
Yep, it is. And I would say document is by far the most important thing. what, since I came out, like I would say, I just want to say this. I did everything by the book from March of 2001 all the way up until, I guess, December, the day after President Trump named Kash Patel as his nominee. I never went public on any of this stuff, with the exception, I'm sorry, I did a podcast in July of last year. I really didn't talk about it in depth. But as far as articles, like I did everything by the book, by the law, 5 USC 2302 and 2303. It's a different statute for the FBI and how you do things. And I followed FBI policy, DOJ policy to a T. Nothing was ever done because I was just an agent. And this is the thing. If you were the SAC or an ASAC and you filed a complaint against a field level agent, they would immediately open up a case against you. Immediately. As absurd as those are. And it's just, and I said in one of my emails, this is definitely not equal internal justice. You guys are, all of these rules exist for higher level management who blew flame to the top to use as a club against people below to make sure that that agency operates the way they want it to operate. And I guess you just hope that the way that they want it to operate is within the confines of the Constitution, law, and policy.
For thee and not for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
forgot to mention this. I actually wrote a 6-page letter and sent it to, it was a whistleblowing letter. I sent it to Governor Lee, and there was another SRO that wrote a 1-page letter and sent it in conjunction with mine. So we emailed it directly to his office and went through the process. And unfortunately, crickets. I basically outlined like they're going against your new law with officers reporting. They're trying to undermine it, and then the whole thing with prioritizing public optics over public safety, all that stuff. And unfortunately, nothing. Which I've actually considered like following back up with that and seeing, but because apparently nothing's changed over there, so it's still.
Are you still employed as a law enforcement officer?
I'm not. I just do this full time now. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. After. In all honesty, like after I came out with some of these articles, I was told, these articles have been read at the highest levels. Expect, someone to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
And, fair enough. We're relatively early in this new administration, but I don't care. Like, I'm more than willing to point out the problems in the FBI that need to be fixed. Am I all knowing? No, I don't know. I just know from a field office operational level, there are certain things that shouldn't be happening, and that would be incentivizing people to find crime based on statistics. That's Orwellian and shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
There's so much other things like adjust the leadership structure, how to promote all of this stuff.
So anyways, back to what you said, follow up with summaries and.
Yep. So summaries. Yep. The other thing I would suggest is, if you have the means, consult an attorney. Mm-hmm. One of the things that
I did that too.
Yep. One of the things that is very valuable and they would never expect, and I'm not talking about just law enforcement, any public sector employee who, because I look at whistleblowing within the state, local, federal government, everybody should be designed or should be, it helps as a counterbalance to the corruption that's going on, right? You want people to come forward with legitimate complaints, not because at the end of the day, we all understand a supervisor has the ability to be a supervisor and to make difficult decisions that negatively may impact you personally. And it's not bad. It's not a violation of policy. It's not illegal. It's just, these are hard decisions they have to make. Mm-hmm. We have to discern between those decisions and what, and the decisions that they're making for personal gain or for what, ulterior motive, legal, against policy or whatever. Those are the decisions we have to discern about. Right. So those people that are complaining on this side, they need to be protected. They need to, get advice. And one of the things that I would suggest is make sure that your state is a one-party consent state for recording. Mm-hmm. If you have to, record them.
Yep, 100%.
You can buy devices that are, a pen or whatever. It's a device that is built into an everyday piece, everyday whatever material that you can audio record these people, and now it's in their own words. do that. Now I know that at the Fed, I could never do that in the FBI because obviously that's a big problem. So I never did that because they probably would want to charge me with a crime.
Yeah.
But at the state level, you're talking about state or local guys. You're talking about completely unclassified things, and and as long as you're a one-party consent state and it's legal to do, I would consult an attorney and make sure that you're good to go, and I'd start recording things.
We actually had some policies that I'm pretty sure, again, someone that works there, used to work there, may fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure we had some policies that said you were not allowed to record supervisors on any department issued device. So it's like, okay, well, I have my personal devices. It works just as well. But I just think it's funny that's like, really, why would you not want me to do that? It seems like that's an unusual policy to have.
Yep.
Especially when you're recording me in every single AI meeting we've had.
It's designed to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And in reality, there are, if you're having a legitimate discussion about a legitimate case, there's no reason to be audio recording. That's this, right? But you're talking about something, personnel issues, whistleblower information, that type of stuff. I'd be recording it every time.
Supervisors telling you not to enforce state laws, stuff like that.
100%. And the other thing, those are the best piece of advice I can give. Just don't ignore it. Document it. Also reach out to other people who've gone through this. I think it's helpful. I did, and I did when I was going through it, and now this person is my business partner. And I met her like 3 years ago. Well, she was going through the same thing out of FBI Louisville. Her name is Delray Beach. And she was a supervisor, a GS-14 supervisor, and she was being sexual misconduct against her. It's a whole story. She's actually public, and it came out in the newspapers, and there's news articles on it. But she got walked out. She got fired because they said, "Oh, you lack candor." Well, her only mistake was blowing the whistle on her ASAC, who was sending her sexually harassing her for a year. And then her, it's a crazy, her story is crazy. She filed a lawsuit. She has a pending lawsuit against the FBI. And the thing is, I know for a fact there are dozens and dozens of women that this has happened to, and not just sexual harassment, but actual sexual assault in the office, that they're too afraid to come forward. Because while I was going through this process, I met a lot of them. And it's not my place to disclose their names because they're still now fearful for their careers, their livelihoods, and everything. And the FBI is one of the worst agencies I've ever seen when it comes to that kind of stuff. Now, my eyes were open, for the first 8 or 9 years, I didn't see any of this stuff, and I was shielded from it. But when I got into that world of being a whistleblower, people gravitate towards you and they tell you their story. And I realized, what the hell was I doing? Why was I with this agency? It needs to be demolished or completely turned upside down and all the bad apples destroyed.
It's like that, not SNL, but it was like the British comedy. Are we the baddies?
Yes, exactly. And when you realize that,
wasn't it the NSA? I think I was listening to Joe Rogan with Elon, and they were talking about the NSA, and they had some recent finding where there was this internal to the NSA chat room thing where they were it was just sexual debauchery and a lot of just wild, things that should not be on a government chat room. We'll say that.
Yes, I heard about that. I just don't know which agency it was.
I think it was
I've heard about it. I didn't. Yeah. Well,
the people that can monitor all of our conversations are talking about stuff that probably should be monitored.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's just at the end of the day, I would just say, if you could reach out to other people who have gone through it or is currently going through it, because it gets really dark. There's times where, at least with who I was blowing the whistle on, I would say super paranoid, but at times I don't think I was paranoid because I think this was actually happening. You're getting followed. There's things going on. There are things that you don't I don't know, if you have a support structure in place while you're going through this, or that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you realize how powerful some of these organizations are, these agencies, even on the local, federal level, and they can target you and come after you, and it puts you in a very bizarre, paranoid state. And it wasn't just me; it was other buddies who experienced the same thing, because there is so much power in that, and they can manipulate the system. And even if it doesn't go anywhere, it can still cause just so much inconvenience, right? I mean,
right.
I said before that, not even in that scenario, but the situations like where some federal agency or local agency goes after an individual, I like, yes, maybe the person doesn't get charged, but the expense and what they had to do over the last X number of years to be able to defend themselves against you with all of your resources, government, all of your resources, you should be forced to put them back to where they were. It shouldn't just be like, oh, okay, you're not guilty. Well, see you later. Thanks for playing.
Yeah. I'm dealing with that right now. Not with me personally, but I've seen coming over to do what I'm doing. So in part, one of the things that have happened a lot in the last couple of months is a lot of people all over Alaska, and some from outside of Alaska, have reached out to me who are whistleblowers, and they're going through it right now. And I'm like, just, document, give them the same kind of guidance, but also tell them, like, I'm also not an attorney. Like, try to find an attorney who's going to help you through this, and they can give you legal advice. I can give you information as to what I did and how I documented things and how my story ended up. And my story's not over. So, and I'm kind of acting as like a sounding board and somebody to like kind of help them through it. Cause there's a lot of people in the state of Alaska, everywhere from the Department of Public Safety through, the Department of Administration and everything in between, they're reaching out to me for information. And I would argue, the state of Alaska, this structure there is pretty bad. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on that they know is going on, and they're covering it up as well. And it's like, it's very disheartening, because before I got in the Bureau, I was like, oh, well, yeah, United States, I'm sure we have some problems, but we're nowhere near as bad as the other countries. Well, we just do it. We are bad. I mean, collectively as the United States, and the way that our governments are set up, and the way that how people are put in there, and how they operate, and the leverage points the leverage that they can pull on people. It is that little c corruption runs rampant. And when I say little c, I mean, like, maybe it's not bribery, it's not extortion, it's not, it's not something that can be charged criminally right away, maybe, but it is little c corruption in the sense of, you don't retaliate against whistleblowers. You don't destroy somebody's life. You don't throw, like, because you are doing something that could result in you being fired, right? So, and in that process, they obstruct criminal investigations that are ongoing. So how much, like, there's one thing I pointed out in one of my emails is like, hey, we, on this one particular case, we've put, there are in upwards of 20 people indictable on a massive corruption case. And we have put in, I don't even know, probably millions and millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money into this investigation. And because you want to go after me, the case is over because I'm blowing the whistle on something. And now that whole case goes away. It doesn't get remedied. I'm not saying that people who are indictable are guilty. They're just indictable, right? But ultimately some of those people, or all of them, could have been found guilty. And restitution paid and all this stuff, right? But like this never even going to see the light of day now, because they wanted to, their egos were bigger than their brains, and they wanted to go after me and bury me as a whistleblower than actually see justice served. And that's what disgusts me. It's not about me so much, because like I don't care. Like, I'm an open book. I ultimately left. I have my own company now, and I take pleasure in ripping apart cases. But I'm also honest. Like, if I got a case the other day, they're like, hey, can you review this? I was like, no, The FBI, they put together a phenomenal case. It's airtight. There isn't really anything you can do. And they're like, okay. Times I'm like, there was an ATF case. There are like, here locally where the agent was doing some very, very, very shady things. And I pointed out all of the issues, and the defense attorney brought it to the prosecutor, and within days they dismissed the case because they know they're wrong. You cannot run an investigation against policy, against the law, you can't violate people's Fourth Amendment. You can't do that. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm blown away by how much I see of it now working on this side.
Gosh.
And I have the line, I'm not gonna work. I'm not, like I always said, like if I was given a case that is revolting, we all know kind of what those types of cases are, and the guy's guilty, does he want to pay me money to give him the advice to plead guilty? Sure. I'm not going to go out of my way to find loopholes to get this guy off. That sounds terrible, but like I don't want to be a part of those types of cases. I want to be a part of those cases that there's legitimate problems. Why did this person get indicted? Was it just the FBI trying to flip the guy and he didn't want to work with the FBI and so they get revenge by indicting him? Like, I'm seeing that. Like,
Gosh.
It's crazy. It's stuff that this isn't America. This is the type of stuff that would happen in Venezuela or Russia or whatever. Like, this is not good. So that's what I'm seeing. My eyes are pretty much open to all this, and I take pleasure in ripping apart, criminal investigations. And I say that on both sides. Like, if you're a good agent, a good law enforcement officer, and you put together a strong case, when I say rip it apart, I'm going to rip it apart and try to find its weaknesses. But if it's a strong case, it's a strong case. I will get back to the defense attorney and say, yeah, you don't have much here. What else you want to do? Like, try to get the guy to plead guilty get the best deal, mitigate his sentencing or whatever. But, it's funny because for many years when I was in the FBI, I was like, I'd never go work on the defense side. But it's important because they don't have the same resources. And are they guilty? Yeah, probably a vast majority of the people who are indicted are guilty. But that's not good enough. Like, if even 1% of people that are getting indicted are innocent, well, hell, we have a problem.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It is. In whole numbers, that's a lot. We shouldn't have that. And so that's kind of my niche and my company's niche. So.
And what is your company? What's the name of it?
Denali Defense Solutions.
Okay.
There's 3 of us that are co-owners, and we kind of just created the company around. All of us are whistleblowers. All of us, when faced with the hard thing, we all decided to do the right thing, and we all paid for it with our careers. But I don't care. There's bigger things than getting, those golden handcuffs of like making good money as a steady paycheck.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be doing, and honestly, I was asked, would I ever go back to the FBI? I'm like, no, I would not. Now you can hire me as a consultant. I'll give you some freaking advice on what you can and can't do, but I'm not going back to the FBI. I just can't go, because after you've got the taste of being your own boss, it's amazing. Yeah. Because I'm sitting here in a collared shirt and I have jogging pants on. This is my COVID outfit. Where else can you do that?
Yeah. So with obviously there's been a lot of changes at the top recently. And just to wrap all this up, are you optimistic about those and with the new leaders been put in place? Or obviously we're not even in the first 100 days, right, in the new administration, and already it's like, good gosh, getting whiplash from all the different things that are happening and stuff that's being revealed. What are your thoughts on all of that as it relates to what
with leadership in general? Are you talking about the new administration, or are we talking about Kash Patel and the FBI?
New administration, Doge, how that ties into all this, and then also Kash Patel and how the FBI. What are your thoughts on that from giving your perspective?
Well, I'm blown away by what they're uncovering with USAID. But part of me also thinks a lot, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing some of those programs were set up like that to run intel ops out of. So we may be inadvertently destroying a good source of foreign intelligence, but I don't know for sure. But on the whole, in the totality, USAID should not exist. That's crazy to me what they're getting involved in. And if our intelligence agency wants to run ops through, other government agencies like USAID, find a different one. Do it a different way. that agency, if even 20% of it is true, should not exist.
Yeah, it honestly sounds like some stuff out of like a Bourne movie, like Blackbriar, like that secret thing they set up, and it's like, oh, this doesn't exist. But they use it for things that they can't get away with their policy. That sounds like what a lot of that is. But
and we have no problem with our externally facing intelligence services doing what's necessary for the benefit of the America's interest. Like if I could go collect on, I don't care, Canadians, go collect on whoever might be a threat to us in the future. That's your job. Do it. Don't be collecting on U.S. persons, because that's not your mission. And that's one of the biggest things. Like you ask about optimism going forward, in general, I mean, yeah, I'm optimistic. I think we're going in the right direction. We need to be going in this direction. We've prioritized other people, other countries far too long over our own selves.
Yep.
And but more narrowly with the FBI and Kash Patel in place, I am optimistic. I hope he does the right thing. But I also mentioned in one of my articles, if he's not doing the right thing, I have no problem calling him out. Like you need to get in there. Like I want the FBI to be apolitical again. If it can't be apolitical and do an apolitical job, it needs to not exist.
Yep.
That's online. And the pendulum, in my view, swung so far away from center over the last several years that we need somebody like Kash Patel to push that pendulum back to the center. If he keeps pushing it to the right, that's where I'll have an issue. We cannot be coming across, or the FBI can't be coming across to the American public as a politicized agency. I feel that Kash Patel in place long enough to get the agency back to where it needs to be. And if he can, stabilize and stay in that lane, left and right lane of completely apolitical and not coming across as targeting left or right in this country and protecting civil liberties, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
If it goes further, I have a problem with it, as everybody should.
Otherwise, it's, this sometimes gets overused, but otherwise it's basically the brown shirts. I mean, they're, it's a political weapon that is.
And it's just and then it'll swing from administration to administration. The FBI's weapon, if it's under, a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, it shouldn't be a weapon under any.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of, be it executive orders or there's a lot of political myopia in this country. It's like, oh, when it's my guy in power, it's fine. But oh crap, now it's the other guy. And now it's like, guys, that's why it should never be that way in the first place.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the most disappointing things I've seen in this country is just the politics being played with agencies that should not be political.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's why I have no interest in ever going back. I would never go back. Granted, if I was asked, I would certainly pitch the idea of like, I'll love to consult. I'll give you ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways.
Well, Tyler, I appreciate
overall,
it. This has been
I'm optimistic, but who knows? In 6 months, I might be like, this, what the hell are we doing? Like, I am I'm comparing how fast they're moving in the federal government on all things to how it's moving inside the FBI, and the FBI is moving a lot slower than the rest of the federal government. I was expecting when Kash was, confirmed that there would be a whole slew of people getting fired, and I haven't seen that. And that should happen.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them in those upper ranks that should not be in the FBI.
Wow. Well, hopefully that starts to trickle down and it starts to have more positive change on the, as it goes lower and lower. But
it's not just the personnel, it's the structure as well.
Absolutely.
The FBI after 9/11 started becoming an intelligence collection agency, and that gets mixed into the criminal investigative side way too much. So you have now agents opening cases, national security cases on U.S. persons with no real, it's like, what's the goal for this case? You're just going to collect information on this person for how long? For what reasons? That's the kind of stuff
creepy.
that needs to stop. No, that's the stuff that should not exist.
Wow.
And that would be your counterintelligence and counterterrorism squads that do that. And they put it under, the guise of domestic terrorism. Okay, anybody that has an ideology that is considered not normal, and if that's mixed with, potential statements, protected statements, I would say, of not specific threats against any individual person, but in general, like, violent statements, general, like that is generalized enough for it to be protected. More often than not, those people get cases opened on them. For what reason? I always said that's protected speech. Stop doing that. And they just, they'll get the legal opinion that they want, and they'll move forward with those cases.
Gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Man. Well.
But then here's the other side of it. Then they say, well, if we didn't do that and this guy turns out to be a school shooter, they're going to look at the FBI and be like, well, what were you doing when this guy came to you? You see that a lot, right? To give the FBI credit, which I don't often do, they get pulled under the rug a lot of times because, like, hey, this guy was on your radar. Why didn't you do anything? And inevitably, there's like, well, what should we have done?
Right.
Short of violating the guy's civil rights, and you want us to follow civil rights, like what should we have done?
Yeah, hindsight's 2020.
Hindsight's 2020. We're never going to stop bad actors. That's the thing. Everybody should understand. There's always going to be bad people. There's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be crime. The best you can do is mitigate it.
Yeah. And
not from an Orwellian perspective.
Yeah. Just monitor everyone's communication, use AI to analyze it, and we'll be good.
And give everybody a social score like China.
Exactly. Yeah. Then we'll have peace.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, this has been great. Thank you so much for the information coming on the show, and especially the advice portion on people who find themselves in that situation. Real quick again, and I'll provide a link below. What is the name of your organization and where people can find you?
Denali Defense Solutions. It's www.denali, DENALI-defense.com.
Okay. Awesome.
And feel free to reach out if anybody out there that is going through this. I'd more than happy to talk. All of us in our company have gone through this, and we all have a soft spot for that, and we all provide guidance. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again, and guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, train to a higher standard.